Hello everyone, it's David again. We are on Babylon 5, Season 4, Episode 16, Exercise of Vital Powers. We start off with Michael Garibaldi recording a personal log stating before Zahadum, Sheridan never would have gone against his government like this. Do you agree with that statement? No, I have a feeling Sheridan's the kind, if you do a wrong in his idea, he's going to go seek justice for the downtrodden no matter what. So, at any rate, we learn that Wade has a master's degree in literature. It reminds me of a patient I was working with on the psych unit, and he had a master's degree in forestry biology, and I was talking to him once about that, and he says, David, I'm crazy. I'm not stupid. Fair enough. Met another one with a PhD. At any rate, we learn that 2 million people are living on Mars. So humanity has pretty much, if you can go out among the stars, the chances of an asteroid taking us all out are infinitely much less. And, pretty much humanity is going to be going on no matter what. Unless we piss off the Minbari again, or unless you come up with a planet killer that annihilates everyone. At any rate, we cue the entrance, and we go in, and Dr. Franklin's in med lab, and he still can't take the telepaths out of their implant. Lyta stops by to talk with Zach, and she inadvertently wakes up one of the telepaths, and without him turning violent. Now, how did she do this? And she said, well, she heard the what I call the shadow scream, or the sound a shadow ship makes when it passes by. Now, of course, the problem is it's out in space. There's no air molecules. The sound that we make is because air molecules are banging up against each other. And since there is no air out in space, there's no sound out in space. But it's science fiction, not science fact. At any rate, she said when she heard that sound in his mind, she kind of just peeled away the layers, and he was able to respond and even to talk in simple, phrases and sentences. So, of course, Dr. Franklin wants to try and replicate that process somehow. We zip on in, and Michael Garibaldi is meeting with William Edgars. They each want loyalty tests, and as part of that first test, Michael Garibaldi is kidnapped and interrogated by Mr. Edgars under a telepath scan. And one of the most telling questions is, are you still in love with my wife? I mean, how loaded of a question is that? And what do you say when there's a telepath sitting right next to you? So, of course, he lies, as a lot of men would do if they were in that situation. And, of course, at the end, she goes, no, he's still in love with her. But unfortunately, Miss Constance was then killed by Wade because they want absolutely no record of what they're doing. We learn that Mr. Edgars grew up in an orange farm in California. He talks about importing orange juice from Earth to Mars and how expensive it is. But isn't that memory a lot like Sheridan? An interesting parallel that those two have is they both like orange juice. At any rate, we learn that Mr. Edgars goes through a little bit of Earth's history and Earth's future history, and we're going to find, I guess in 2025, the Iraqis are going to get their turn to be the dominant, crazy party, because in 1938 it was Hitler and the Nazis. In 2025, the Iraqis are going to take over, I guess, or at least try and take over. So, got 3 years until that happens. Isn't it interesting when you watch these science fiction shows or movies and stuff, and they always make these grand predictions about the future, and all of a sudden that future comes and goes, and you're like, well, that never happened. But at any rate, Mr. Edgars is concerned that if Sheridan corners Clark, Clark will give the Psi Corps all the power that they could ever want. And he says once they have that power, they're never going to let go of it. And he does not want a world where telepaths are able to run around and read people's thoughts, because eventually he says it's going to be an us versus them. You know, they're going to be the superior, we're going to be the inferior. He also makes a really telling comment to megacorps have been running things behind the scenes for years. We just don't show ourselves much. People wouldn't understand. Boy, isn't that telling. It's like JMS was just shaking his crystal ball and boop, up it popped. Of course, in the 90s that was going on, at the same time too. It's just, it seems to keep getting wider and wider, the gap between the haves and the have-nots. What do you guys think about that? Any truth to that, or am I just being paranoid? Make a comment down below. Sheridan finally has to brief Dr. Franklin on the real reasons he wants the telepaths up and running. And Dr. Franklin is quite frankly shocked. He comes out of med lab. Lyta happens to be coming by, and he says to her, the Sheridan I knew before Zahadum would have never told me what this one just did. But he says, but he's right, it has to be done. So, what does that mean, do you think? If you've seen the episodes before, you'll know exactly what it is. I'm going to try and not make too many spoiler alerts, but here we go. Dr. Franklin hires Lyta for a job on Mars. We zip on in, and Garibaldi is talking to Lise in the room where she brings him dinner, and they have kind of another one of their letting go process or something. And he asks her, because she talks about meeting Mr. Edgars, and he says, what, is it the money? And she says, no, it's not the money. I just love him for who he is. Really, lady? Are you kidding me? Unlike you, Lise, Hampton, Edgars, whatever you want to call yourself, I can be bought. If you walk through my door and you've got a net worth over $10 million, trust me, call me. Okay? If any of you watching this right now, if you have a net worth over $1 billion, please call me. Anytime, day or night. I don't care about the 8-hour time difference between my house and Mars. Babylon 5 and Mars, or whatever the hell it is. Call me anytime, day or night. We end up going, and Mr. Edgars goes into a room, and there is a man we find out later is a telepath who is obviously dying. He ends up touching this poor telepath, and Wade says, I don't wish you wouldn't do that. And Mr. Edgars is like, look, dude, this is combined just 2 telepaths. He can't possibly hurt me. And it reminds me of an episode I had with one of my patients, one of the very first HIV patients I took care of out of nursing school. And I went and I took off my gloves after, meeting him and his husband and his ex-wife. And they were in the room, and I took off my gloves and I touched his bare hand, and they just looked at me like shocked. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, nobody will touch him unless they have gloves on. And a lot of them have those big isolation gowns and those big masks and everything that now are a staple that we have the pandemic. But, his husband and ex-wife were just stunned. None of the other nurses would touch him. And I'm like, he can't infect me. There's no, reason to do that. And so it just, tells you the paranoia, even of a supposedly educated man like Wade. But, his degree is in literature, not in medicine or nursing or anything like that. At any rate, a lot of people are dying in this room, and Mr. Edgars gives the order to put them all down. He's tired of suffering. We don't need to add to it. And at the very end, Mr. Edgars wants the ultimate loyalty test from Mr. Garibaldi. He wants Mr. Garibaldi, to cough up Sheridan so that he can placate Clark long enough for the megacorps to come in and take over. I guess overtly instead of covertly this time. At any rate, lots to discuss down below. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you next episode.